Before I went to federal prison, my FICO score was around 780. Pretty good, huh? I also had more than $120,000 in credit card debt, and I knew that my income was about to disappear. I had a choice: keep feeding these accounts to protect the number, or hold on to the money that I was going to need to survive. Eventually, I said, fuck it. I stopped paying. When I came home, my credit score was in the low 500s. But here's a part a lot of credit repair people won't tell you. You may not need to pay every old debt to restart building. Paying an old credit collection may not remove it from your report. It may not improve your score. And depending on the debt and the law in your state, making even a small payment can restart a legal clock that had already run out. Your credit score is not the emergency. Housing might be, transportation might be, food, medication, insurance, and keeping your job might be. My credit is coming back now, not because I found a secret letter or paid everybody at once. It's coming back because I stopped creating new damage and started rebuilding a new record. Today, I'm going to show you how to survive while your credit catches up to the person you're becoming. But this episode is not only for people coming home from prison. It's for anyone whose life changed faster than the credit report did. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you went through a divorce. Maybe a business failed. Maybe you had a medical crisis, an addiction, a foreclosure, or a family emergency that swallowed everything you had. And now, every time you look at your credit score, you compare yourself to the person you used to be. Before my life fell apart, credit was something I understood very well. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration with an option in economics, and I have a law degree. I had studied the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, not just enough to recognize the initials. I understood how the laws worked. When I was in the bail bond business, I regularly dealt with clients who couldn't qualify for a bond because of the credit. I even wrote a small book that I would give some of them to explain how credit worked. In certain cases, I would loan a client the money for the bond premium and report that loan to Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And if the client made the payments properly, the loan would help establish positive credit history. Credit repair eventually became a side hustle for me. I'm not saying that to impress anyone. Degrees didn't prevent me from making terrible decisions, and knowledge didn't prevent addiction, and it certainly didn't stop the feds from putting me in prison. I'm telling you because of what happened next. I went from being the guy explaining credit to other people to being the person who needed the explanation. It was very humbling. Maybe that's the first real lesson of this episode. Intelligence does not make you immune to financial collapse. Neither does education. Neither does a good career. Neither does having an 800 credit score 10 years ago. Because life doesn't care what your score used to be. I want to be accountable for the 120 grand. Those were my accounts. I made the charges. The credit card companies didn't force me to use the cards, and the damage to my score was not some bureaucratic conspiracy. But once I knew I was going to prison, the calculation changed. Was I supposed to drain what little money I still had, trying to preserve a credit score that I wouldn't need for several years? Or did I need that money for attorney fees, family obligations, medical needs, and whatever survival was going to look like? Eventually, preserving the cash became more important than preserving a number. That was financial triage. That was not a brilliant credit strategy. Inside prison, a 780 FICO score doesn't put money on my books. The BOP doesn't give a damn or give you a better mattress because you have a good payment history. And the judge doesn't shave 6 months off your sentence because you kept American Express happy. So I let it go. That decision damaged my credit, but it also forced me to understand something that I hadn't completely understood before. Credit score is a tool. It's not an identity. People coming home from prison face a big combination. They have a felony record, a gap in employment, no current rental history, very little cash, and damaged credit all at the same time. But the feeling itself is not limited to former inmates. People close to me, including people I mentioned in my last financial episode, and told me the credit now is so bad they can't qualify to rent an apartment. These aren't people coming home from prison. They're working people who experience layoffs, income losses, medical problems, and just life. And millions of Americans are carrying the same weight. In the second quarter of 2026, credit card balances in the United States reached approximately $1.26 trillion. And the New York Federal Reserve said new delinquencies on credit cards and auto loans remained elevated. The Federal Reserve also found that 16% of adults had not paid all their bills during the prior month. So this is not a story about a few irresponsible people who need to try harder. A lot of people are struggling. The point is not to excuse bad decisions, it's to stop treating financial difficulty as proof that somebody's defective. The first thing that changed, or maybe the first thing I'd forgotten, is that there's no single credit score. You may open an app and see 612, and an auto dealer pulls up something different. A mortgage lender may see another version. A credit card company may use a score built for credit card risks. A landlord may use an entirely different tenant screening product. Different scoring companies use different formulas. Different lenders use different versions. The information may also come from different credit bureaus. So when somebody says that my credit score is 640, my first question is, well, which score? Calculated by who? Using which bureau? For what kind of decision? A credit score is simply a company's estimate of how likely you are to repay borrowed money. It's not a complete measurement of your ability, your honesty, or your value. And the score you see on your phone may not be the score that decides whether you get the apartment, car, or mortgage. The real goal is not to chase a particular number so you can feel respectable again. The goal is to become less expensive to insure, less expensive to finance, and easier to approve. When I left prison, I had approximately $300 on a prepaid Visa card from the BOP at 63. I had to report to a halfway house. I needed ID. I needed work clothes. I needed transportation, a phone. I needed to get a job. When I finally made it to the Texas Department of Public Safety to get my ID, I discovered I don't even have the $24 filing fee. I had to call my brother and ask him to send it to me while I was standing there in line. It would have been absurd for me to send $300 to an old credit card collector and then have no money for ID, transportation, or getting to work. The credit card was not going to get me out of the halfway house. The ID and the job might. That's what survival before repair means. Protect the things that allow you to function. Your housing, your utilities, phone, medication, insurance, transportation, insurance, your ability to get to work, and at least a small cash buffer so one flat tire or copay doesn't send you straight back to a high-interest lender. When I wrote about release on a high cost, I called it rebuilding from zero with rules still wrapped around everything. I went from having money, property, and credit to riding a bus with an ankle monitor and watching every dollar. That experience changed what money meant to me. Your first financial goal after a collapse is not to look impressive on a credit application, it's to remain standing. You do not necessarily have to pay every old debt. It means you should understand what you're paying and what that payment will accomplish. Before handing over any money, you may need to survive. Second, how old is the debt? The important date is usually connected to the original delinquency, not the date the collection company bought the account and started calling you. A collector cannot legally keep changing the date to make an old account look new. Third, can the creditor still sue? The credit reporting period and the statute of limitations are two different clocks. And in some states, making a partial payment or acknowledging the debt can restart the limitations period. That means a well-intentioned $25 payment could potentially place you in a worse legal position. Fourth, what will paying it actually buy you? The CFPB has specifically warned that paying a collection may not improve a consumer's credit score. Also understand that forgiven debt can sometimes create taxable income. A creditor may issue a Form 1099-C for canceled debt. Fifth, what else does that money need to do? Paying old debt while creating new payments is not rebuilding. It's moving damage from one creditor to another. Bankruptcy is not right for everyone, and many debts have special rules, but it is a lawful financial process, not a character defect. Medical debt is where people are receiving some of the worst information. A lot of people have heard that medical debt is removed from credit reports. That is not completely true. In January of 2025, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a rule that would have broadly prohibited medical debt from appearing on credit reports used by lenders. But on July 11th, 2025, a federal court vacated that rule. So, as of this recording, August 26th, there is no blanket federal rule removing every medical debt from credit reports. However, the three major credit bureaus still have important voluntary policies. Paid medical collection debt is removed. Medical collection debt with an initial reported balance under $500 is removed, and unpaid medical collections generally receive a 1 year waiting period before appearing on a credit report. Larger unpaid medical collections can still appear after that waiting period. Before paying a medical collection, compare the bill to the insurance EOB. Ask for an itemized statement. Find out whether insurance should have paid more. Ask whether the provider has a financial assistance or charity program. Most do. Tax exempt hospitals are required to maintain written financial assistance policies, and they must make reasonable efforts to determine whether a patient qualifies before taking certain extraordinary collection actions. Also, check whether the No Surprises Act applies. It protects many consumers from certain unexpected out of network medical bills, particularly in emergency situations and at in network facilities. And be careful about putting a medical bill on credit card or medical financing. Once the provider is paid and you owe the credit card company, you may have converted medical debt into ordinary credit card debt. The special medical debt reporting policies generally don't follow that balance onto the credit card. Don't convert a disputed hospital bill into 29% credit card debt just because somebody behind a desk slides an application across the desk. Bad credit becomes especially painful when you need housing. A person may have enough income to pay the rent, but still get rejected by an automated screening system because of credit, a prior rental dispute, an eviction record, or criminal history information. That's important for people returning from prison because the landlord may not be looking at a FICO score only. He can look at a credit tenant screening report and can look at addresses, rental payment information, eviction filings, criminal court records. These reports can also contain errors. So before paying another non-refundable application fee, ask the property manager what screening company you use, what credit standard do you require, do you automatically reject applicants with a felony, and do you allow a higher deposit or cosigner? And will you consider proof of income and rental references? Do not pay $75 to apply for a place that has a written policy making approval impossible. If a landlord denies the application, requires a cosigner, or charges more because of a consumer report, that may be an adverse action, and the landlord generally has to identify the company that supplied the report and tell you that you can request a free copy within 60 days and dispute the errors. This isn't a complicated credit repair course, but rebuilding itself does not need to be complicated. First, stop creating fresh late payments. A recent missed payment can hurt more than an old mistake that's already aging. Second, use very little of the revolving credit available to you. High balances can make someone appear financially overextended, even when every minimum payment is made on time. Third, don't apply for every credit card that says pre-approved. One secured card from a legitimate bank or credit union used for one small recurring expense and paid on time or conveniences can create better evidence than high five cards opened in a panic. And when you're not actively applying for credit, consider freezing your reports. A federal security freeze is free and can make it harder for somebody to open a fraudulent account in your name. A paid credit lock is not more effective than a freeze. Most importantly, don't pay anybody hundreds or thousands of dollars to dispute information you know is accurate. Errors can be disputed for free. Accurate negative information generally can't be permanently removed simply because a company sends repeated form letters. In the last financial episode, I discussed how people in their 50s and 60s can use AI without becoming technology experts. Credit is another good use for it. Not to perform some illegal credit sweep, but to organize information. Download or print your 3 reports. Then create a redacted summary. Remove your social security number, birth date, complete account numbers, report access codes, and any other identifying information. Then use a prompt like this. I am rebuilding financially after a major disruption. Below are redacted entries from my Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion credit reports. Create a table showing the creditor, bureau, balance, account status, date of first delinquency, last reported date, and whether the information differs from reports. Separate the accounts into current accounts, collections, possible errors, duplicate entries, items that may be older than 7 years, and items requiring more information. Do not tell me to dispute information merely because it's negative. Do not make legal conclusions. Give me a list of questions to investigate in a 30-day organization plan. AI can also help explain an adverse action letter, organize medical bills, create questions for landlords, or turn a pile of collection notices into a simple spreadsheet. But AI does not know whether their particular payment will restart the statute of limitations in your state. Use it as an organizer, not your lawyer. My credit is actually coming back. I'm not back nearly where I was before prison, and I didn't fix everything with one check. I also stopped measuring my recovery against the 780 FICO score that belonged to a completely different life. That score was supported by a different income, different accounts, different assets, a life that eventually collapsed. Today, I have something more useful: consistency. I pay attention, I protect the life I have now, and I don't open accounts simply because somebody offers it. I don't create new damage trying to erase old shame. And slowly, the credit report is beginning to reflect that. A credit score is a lagging indicator. It can continue telling a story of your old life long after you've started living differently, but eventually, the data begins to catch up. For the person coming home from prison, you're not going to repair everything before the halfway house wants proof of employment. For the person who lost a job at 58, you're not going to replace 20 years of income in 90 days. For the person recovering from divorce, illness, addiction, foreclosure, or failed business, you don't have to solve your entire past before you're allowed to build a future. Start with stability. Keep a roof over your head. Keep your transportation working. Keep the current bills current. Find out what the old debts actually are. Understand the legal clocks. Pay or settle the ones that advance your life or protect you from a real consequence. And do not let a 3-digit number convince you that the person you used to be is more valuable than the person that you are now. My score went from around 780 to the low 5s. It's coming back. But more importantly, so am I. But before I go, let me say one thing about subscribing. I don't ask you to subscribe just to make a number on the channel go up. I ask because I put a tremendous amount of work into researching this channel every single day. I monitor the Federal Register, new federal laws and proposed legislation on Congress.gov, Supreme Court opinions and orders, federal appellate decisions, especially the Fifth Circuit, Department of Justice, announcements and policy changes, Bureau of Prison programs, statements and notices, and amendments, reports, and data from the U.S. Sentencing Commission. And when the subject involves money, housing, credit, benefits, or rebuilding after prison, I also check agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Federal Trade Commission, Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the Social Security Administration and the IRS. I'm not interested in repeating a headline that someone already posted on Facebook or YouTube. So if that kind of work saves you time and clears up some confusion or helps somebody you care about make a better decision, please subscribe to the channel. Not as a favor to me. Subscribe so YouTube understands that there's an audience for careful, honest information, and so you don't mix the next change that can actually affect your life. Thanks for watching.